Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to Dave Jackson, headmaster of the School of Podcasting at schoolofpodcasting.com. Stick around. If you don't, you risk a week's detention. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview. You know, MrMedia.com, MRmedia.com. Stop by and check it out. There are more than 700 archived celebrity and pop culture interviews for your listening pleasure. The show is brought to you today by Audible. Audible is offering Mr. Media listeners a free audiobook download and a 14-day trial offer to give you a chance to check out their very cool service. I love listening to books on tape. If you've never tried it, actors or sometimes the authors themselves read to you. It's great for the commute, the beach, or even unwinding before bed. You can choose a free audiobook from Audible's enormous library of titles, including today's top legal bestsellers, such as The Fifth Witness by novelist Michael Connelly, Theodore Boone, Kid Lawyer by John Grisham, or even Letters to a Young Lawyer by Alan M. Dershowitz. You could also download The Profiler, written by famed criminal profiler Pat Brown and yours truly, which Pat will read to you personally. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/radio. Again, that's audibletrial.com/radio for your free audiobook. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience that includes broadcast radio personalities looking for pointers into the brave new world of podcasting in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. If you listen to podcasts, and who doesn't these days, you know that part of the appeal is that you can find shows about whatever subject you're interested in. Got an itch? No, really. I mean, is something unknown making you scratch? There's a medical podcast for that. Looking for fellow believers in the Church of George Lucas and the Force? There's a Star Wars podcast for that. Interested in filmmaker Kevin Smith? He's got so many podcasts he had to start his own network to keep track. And you can find them all on the Stitcher app for iPhones and Droids, or on iTunes, or even Blog Talk Radio. But if you're a podcaster, where do you turn for like-minded folks, good ideas, and problem solving? Well, I recently came across a show called The School of Podcasting. It's a long-running podcast hosted by Dave Jackson, and it taught me a big lesson. When it comes to podcasting, I may have 5 years of experience, but my knowledge is like a single flea on a mangy dog's back. It's nothing. There is so much to learn, and every time I listen to Dave's show, I come away a little smarter, a little more aware. In addition to his weekly shows, which are free by subscription, you can also pay for more detailed podcast tutorials and live training with Jackson at one of his websites, schoolofpodcasting.com or davidjackson.org. He's also written an ebook, More Podcast Money. So I've invited the principal of the School of Broadcasting to join me for conversation tonight. Now, I understand this might be a little too inside baseball for some regular Mr. Media listeners. On the other hand, you might just find yourself inspired to try developing your own podcast. And with that, Dave Jackson, welcome to Mr. Media.
Bob, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Good to have a professional podcaster on here. You even got the professional microphone, got the headset.
I'm trying to look the part, you know.
You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You know, I know the exact minute that I had to have you on Mr. Media, I can tell you.
All right.
I was listening to the show. I'm walking the dogs, which is when I always listen to podcasts. And you were disemboweling a fellow who had advertised a book on how to make money in podcasting. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the guy that's been in podcasting for 14 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you fill our listeners and viewers in a little bit about what was going on there?
Well, one of the things that drives me somewhat crazy is I am not a broadcaster. I can talk in front of a microphone, but that doesn't mean I can walk into a radio show and do 4 hours. And likewise, I don't think somebody that can do 4 hours understands podcasting. And so this guy came on and he announced that here I am. I'm Mr. Podcast Person, and I've got this book that has all the answers. And he said he'd been podcasting for 14 years, which is interesting because podcasting was invented in 2004. And I said, let me do the math there. Wait a second. And then even later on his website, he admitted that podcasting started in 2004. And I went, then 14, carry the 1, divided. No, that doesn't add up. And it just went on. And it when I then went to find his podcast, none of them downloaded. So I went, okay, here's the guy that you're going to get podcasting advice, because his podcast doesn't work. And many people call themselves a podcast expert. They don't have a podcast. And that's kind of like me saying, you know, I'm a NASCAR driver, but I don't own a car. It just doesn't work. So, and the more I kind of, you know, just Googled him, basically, his website was some sort of Google free thing. I forget what it was, but he didn't even have that. And I just went, okay, because normally I try not to be, I mean, I kind of said I was doing a Howard Stern. Howard Stern used to just butcher his quote competition. And mine was like, not so much this guy's my competition. It's just, I don't want somebody to go out and buy this guy's book, because if his book is anything like his credentials that I've found so far, you know, and it even says in the book, read articles by so-and-so and so-and-so. So it kind of looked, and I don't know this is my speculation, that he just went and found articles on podcasting and put them into an ebook. Yeah. So I just was like, yeah, this has got to stop. I got to alert the world that, you know, because he had really good, you know, some graphics and it looked good, but I just was like, yeah, this isn't going to work.
I love that, because besides, I mean, just a precise takedown of this guy's presentation and marketing pitch, and I mean, yeah, I love that you remembered about the fact that his podcast wasn't accessible. I mean, it just cracked me up. But you bring and to that, and pretty much to every episode, attitude. And I think some people who do podcasting, something that I think is missing is attitude. You know, it's not. You're not. I don't think anyway. You're going to attract people to you time and time again. By just being namby-pamby and just being, you know, flatline. I mean, you have that anecdote had a lot of attitude. It was funny. Actually, it was hysterical. I mean, that was why I thought I got to talk to this guy.
Well, it's so true. If you think about the super, you know, the Rush Limbaughs, the Glenn Beck, give me somebody else that's real famous on the radio. There's a guy here in Cleveland, the #1 guy. They all are, to a certain extent, polarizing. You either love them or hate them. And to me, I've always said with podcasting, the key to your content is it has to move people. It's either going to make you laugh, it's going to make you cry, it's going to make you think, it might make you groan, or it's going to educate or entertain. And when you try to please everybody, you end up being so, like, you vanilla, Melba toast, whatever you want to call it, that it's just like, well, okay, you know, that was helpful, I guess, or whatever. I listened to a podcast today called The Nerdcast. Now, this is actually going to go on the radio, and I was like, oh, I should listen to this. This should be good. And the guy is a comedian. He used to be on Singled Out on MTV back in the day with Jenny McCarthy. And I listened to it, and I've listened to 2 episodes. I haven't made it through one yet. And the first 15 minutes was just him talking about him. And he had a really good trip to New York, but he never really explained why it was a really good trip. And the kind of makeup of the show is supposed to be kind of pop culture. And they just talked about how, hey, somebody blogged about one of the co-hosts and said he was fat, but don't worry, we have your back. And I'm like, this isn't moving me. It's not, you know, and today I made it through halfway through the second one. I'm like, okay, I'll try one more episode, but at this point, I'm ready to go, yeah, no thanks.
Dave, was that the Nerdcast or the Nerdist?
I think it's the Nerdist with Chris.
Yeah.
Chart, something.
Now I'm going to draw a blank now. You know, Chris, it's funny. I've listened to it, and I understand what you're getting at. There are times when it starts off so self-involved and so it's just so dry. But in their defense, I have it on my Stitcher account, and I check it out each time, because when he has a guest, and he gets some great guests, he's still a stand-up comedian, and he does very well on the road, supported by his podcast. When he has a guest, and he gets some great guests, Patton Oswalt, he gets a lot of comedians. Mark Maron has been on there. Kevin Smith's been on there. When he has a guest, the show pops and it flies. However, However, when he doesn't, and it's just him and his buddies sitting around chewing the fat, I just move on, you know. And that's it. I mean, that's one of the great things I think about podcasts is that there are so many of them. You don't have to sit and listen. I mean, if you're a conservative right winger, you're going to listen to Rush and you're going to listen to Glenn Beck and that guy on that other guy, and that other guy, and the other guy, all the rich white guys on Fox. But you know, that's kind of it. But when you look at podcasts, there's probably hundreds of conservative right-wing podcasters you could turn to. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in comedy, you can listen to The Nerdist. Right. You can listen to Mark Maron. You can listen to the Kevin Smith stuff. Larry Miller's got a thing. Adam Carolla.
Adam Carolla. Greg. I've been listening to Greg Fitzsimmons. He's pretty same. Greg Fitzsimmons, same thing. When he has a guest, he's great. Sometimes he takes a little too long to get to the guest, but he's an interesting another guy. He's just you're kind of listening to him going, wow, because he says things that are really somewhat offensive, and he's just like, hey, shut up, you're getting the podcast for free. And it's like, wow, okay.
Well, and that's, I mean, these guys, the comedians have this persona that they've developed over the years, and they continue it into their podcast. And I guess you either buy into it and you're a fan, or you might drop in occasionally.